Today I'm so excited to share with you how to make bubble bars that are just like the Lush bubble bars. Just one bar will fill your bath with tons of fluffy bubbles, and I'll be sharing the easy bubble bar recipe with you today. First, you're going to need some baking soda, some SLSA powder, cornstarch, cream of tartar, vegetable glycerin, fractionated coconut oil, essential oils. I use bergamot and cypress, but you could also use fragrance oils too. And last, you'll need some coloring. I used Americolor gel coloring. Now it's time to put on some gloves and get mixing. First, you'll need 1 cup of baking soda. Next, you'll add in 1 cup of SLSA. SLSA is a super fine powder that creates the bubbles. So what you need to do is pour very, very slowly because it's so fine it will get up in the air easily. You need to make sure you're wearing a mask and gloves as well. Now add 1/3 cup cream of tartar and 1/3 cup of cornstarch. Use a wire whisk to mix it up very carefully because of that SLSA. We don't want to get that up in the air. Now I've sped this mixing part up so the video is not too long, but in reality I'm stirring very slowly because I don't want to get that SLSA up in the air. Once the dry ingredients are mixed, set them aside, and then it's time to mix the wet ingredients. First, you'll add 1/3 cup of glycerin, next, you'll add 1 tablespoon of fractionated coconut oil. You could also use castor oil or sweet almond oil if you have that on hand. Now it's time to add in the essential oils. I used bergamot and cypress because I wanted my bubble bar to smell like Lush's Comforter bubble bar, which also has bergamot and cypress essential oils. I started with around 20 drops, but ended up adding more because the fragrance was a little too light for me. Now it's time to pour the wet ingredients into the dry ingredients. Do this very slowly and carefully. Make sure you get all of it out so you don't waste any of those good ingredients. I like to use my hand on this part to mix the ingredients up. I thought it was much easier. Just be sure you're wearing gloves, again, because of that SLSA. It can be irritating when it's in powder form, but once it's dried in the bubble bar, it's fine. It's not irritating at all. And just a heads up, SLSA is a natural product. It's derived from coconut and palm oil. Please don't confuse that with SLS, which can be irritating to people. SLSA is safe and natural. So after mixing for a few minutes, my dough seemed a little powdery and too dry, so I added some glycerin to it to make it a little more moist. And then I kept mixing and mixing until it came to the right consistency. You want the dough to be able to hold its form, so if you grab a handful and clump it together, it'll stay together in a ball, and that's the perfect consistency right there. If you want to do multiple colors, then you'll want to separate this amount into a couple different bowls and mix up your colors. I did 2 different colors. One bowl I kept plain white, and the other half I added some coloring to. I used gel food coloring and it worked great. I used Americolor gel food coloring and it was perfect. I used a bright pink color. I think it's called electric pink. So you want to add a little bit at first, mix it in really well. It's a little clumpy at first, but just keep mixing and mixing until you get a consistent color. I ended up adding a few more drops of food coloring because the pink was a little too subtle for me. I wanted a really bright pink like the Comforter Lush bubble bar. And so I added a little more and kept mixing it up until I got the perfect pink color I was looking for. Now comes the fun part. You are going to flatten out the dough, and unfortunately I thought I hit record, but I didn't. So I started with my pink dough. I rolled it all out till it was pretty flat, and then I added the white over the top and rolled it all out. I used parchment paper as the base so I didn't color my table, and then I used parchment paper over the top as well so that the dough didn't stick to my rolling pin, and that helped a lot and made the top nice and smooth. Now I've made these bubble bars a few times now, and I've tried a couple different shapes when rolling them out. I found that this method right here in the video gave me the best shape of the bars and a good amount. And so what I did is I made kind of a long skinny rectangle, and I found that that made my bubble bars nice and thick because I wanted bigger bars. I did it another time where I made more of a square shape and the bars were really small and it didn't work out quite as well. So I found that a long skinny rectangle like you see here worked out pretty well. So what you're going to do is basically this is just like rolling cinnamon rolls. You're going to start at one end and you're going to use the wax paper to help you roll the one end into like a roll, like a cinnamon roll. And so go very slowly and roll very carefully, making sure you're using your fingers to push it together as you roll. Take your time, you want to get this part right. The dough does start cracking a little bit here and there, but I just used my fingers to smooth it out. So just keep rolling with the parchment paper, then pull the paper a little bit. Use your fingers to make the roll nice and tight. Just keep going until you get to the very end. Once you're at the end, squeeze everything together so you don't have cracks. And so you make sure you're filling it in nice and tight. You could see my little friend's hand right there trying to help me out. Now it's time to take a sharp knife and cut your bubble bar roll in 2 sections. You can make your bubble bars as thin or as thick as you like. I wanted mine kind of thick, so mine are maybe probably between 1.5 inches to 2 inches thick. Then I set them out on a baking sheet to dry. I made sure I stuck parchment paper underneath since it is my baking sheet I use to bake with. I love the amazing swirl design that these have. I think they turned out perfect. I think they look really cool, almost like a piece of cinnamon bread with that nice swirl. Now this recipe makes about 10 bubble bars. The ones on the ends were just a little bit smaller than the ones in the middle, but overall I'd say they're pretty uniform and pretty close in size. Now comes the hardest part, and that's the waiting. You don't want to touch these for at least a few days because it takes a little while for them to dry. It took a little longer for mine too because I added glycerin. So if you add more glycerin, if your dough seems a little dry, then it's definitely going to add more time. Now after a few days, don't make the same mistake I did. I touched one of the prettiest, biggest bubble bars, and of course the whole thing crumbled because it wasn't completely dry. So I would test on one of the end pieces that doesn't look quite as good. Just very gently touch it with your finger. You want it to be rock hard. If it's not rock hard yet, just keep letting it sit for a couple days more. Once it's rock hard, then you can use it in the bathtub. Aren't they so pretty? I love how these Lush bubble bars turned out, and they look just like the Lush Comforter bubble bars in the store for much less. These are so much fun because you can mix up the colors, you can mix up the scents, and you can make your own shapes too. Now to use your bubble bar, turn on your bath water and let it go for a little bit. Then take your bubble bar and crumble it up into little pieces and then put it underneath the running water. And you'll notice bubbles start going right away and your water will start turning whatever color you used. As the water fills up higher and higher, you'll get more and more bubbles. Now it's kind of hard to tell in my video, but my bathwater was a really pretty pinky purpley color. I love all of the big foamy bubbles too that were in the bathtub. I was surprised at how long the bubbles lasted. They lasted for quite a while and they got pretty tall. Now that you've seen how easy it is to make your own bubble bars, I hope you give this bubble bar recipe a try and let me know how it goes. Thanks so much for watching. If you like this video, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more creative tutorials.